We're talking about 3 different surface methods that need to be addressed at the green stage. So I'm going to demo for you a carving only. And here's a nice example of what you could have after it's been glazed if it's just carving. And then we're going to use this mug to demo for you Sgraffito on the top, which here's a finished example of Sgraffito. And Mishima or Inlay on the bottom, here's an example. All will be explained. Each of these processes have a few things in common. First of all, you will need a visual idea. Sometimes we can freestyle it out of our head. That's fine, you can do that. But as a beginner, I would begin with a visual idea in front of us. And I have a whole envelope of patterns and ideas that is found over on counter 4 in the tray that says patterns. Here's some of the patterns I'll be working from today. The other thing is to not rush the steps. Some of these have to be done in stages and even wait until the next class. And then lastly, the best condition that your green clay can be in is a soft leather hard. Now, leather hard becomes too hard when it starts to get shiny, lighter in color, and when you scratch away from it and you see dust, not ribbons. This is a perfect soft leather hard because I can make impressions on the surface, but the structure itself doesn't change. There's not a lot of water in it, so it won't interact with the materials that I put on it. For carving, you're going to need various carving tool options. Know them before you choose. Try them out maybe on a practice slab. You'll need a pattern or an idea, or you can just freestyle it. And you're going to need time and patience because this is a learning experiment. Carving on green clay gives you lots of really cool options for after your clay has been fired and glazed, the way the glaze breaks and pools over the carvings. So I'm going to be partially using this carving design as my visual sample and also drawing from these various patterns and see what I come up with. I've already drawn a boundary where I'm going to start and finish my carving. I'm going to do a little bit of freestyling, and I'm using an outline, just a dull pencil. So there's just the starter outline. Now that I have my base outline, I can choose a carving tool. There's many different carving tools to choose from, ranging from broad to narrow, tools that we have in the classroom, and even found tools. I did my outline with a dull pencil, and now I'm going to use a beveled small carving tool to follow these outlines. This is part of the reason why we left our wall of our slab thick, so that we could have the option to carve. Remember, we are thinking in mind with the end, which is when this gets to the glazing stage, the way that the glaze will break and pool over these various raised and recessed areas for an interesting glazing. I haven't put color over this, and I won't until after this is bisque fired and I put glaze over it. It's got a nice relief to it. Materials needed for inlay or mishima: wax resist, underglaze or non-glaze colorant like slip or on-gobe or even oxides. You'll need a pattern and an idea, a carving tool of your choice, try different ones if you like, a scraper to scrape the underglaze off at the final stage. You'll need time and patience because this may take 2 classes. Inlay, also called mishima, is the opposite of Sgraffito. You have the carvings prepared ahead of time and then you dab the thick underglaze or non-glaze colorant into the carving. From here to about here, I'm going to demonstrate inlay or mishima. Mishima and inlay are interchangeable words Mishima has more of a cultural context to it. I'm painting wax resist first before I do any carving or apply any color. Now, wax resist ruins paintbrushes, so immediately after you're done, you have to wash the brush out or you will ruin it. Now, it's going to take a while for this wax resist to dry, so you need to be patient. Maybe go do something else. I wouldn't always advise taking a blow dryer to it. If you do, do it not directly, because you don't want to melt the wax. We'll come back to this and begin our inlay when the wax resist is dry. The wax resist is no longer white once it's dry. It's tacky to the touch, but it doesn't goop off. So I'm going to use loosely this design, give it a try, make little markers for myself. And this is just doing the trace. I'm just doing the sketch, okay? So I'm just kind of lightly, I'm not going deep. I'm just barely at the surface because this is not the commitment. I am breaking through the wax, but I'm going to need my carvings into the wax and into the clay to be much deeper if I'm going to inlay color into them. And again, the color is the underglaze, or it could be on gobe or slip or a colorant. So now I'm going to use something that's a little thicker, maybe the end of a paintbrush. I've got my lines here that I gently sketched. Okay? And you can see we're ribboning off, which is a nice, easy carving. I would say this clay body, even though we should be soft leather hard or ideally leather hard, this clay body is still a little wet for what I'm asking it to do. So patience, truly leather hard is the best stage for Mishima, Sgraffito, but we have a plan to put a handle on this mug, so we don't want it to get too far leather hard, which is why we went ahead and started at soft leather hard. So you can see now I'm going back and reinforcing these carvings, making sure that I've carved deeply. Obviously I've carved through the wax resist, but have I carved deeply into the clay body? And this is part of the reason we rolled these slabs rather thick. Sometimes we get these little burrs. We just use a dry toothbrush or even these fine burr brushes to get those things out so they don't create goop. This is actually not a paintbrush. We have about 3 of these in the classroom, so if you see them sitting in the paintbrush carousel, move them over with the fine carving tool. So Mishima, next step is to get the color in. And I've got a nice on-go here, and I've got a chartreuse on-go here, and the other one was blue-green. And this is where I like to use a fettling knife, because I'm really kind of, I'm not brushing it in, I'm trying to goop it in. See how I'm going outside the lines? And you can use a paintbrush. My paintbrush is not wet, but I'm loading it full. And notice I am not nervous about going outside the lines, not at all. And why is that? Because that wax resist that I put on there is going to show us that this outside the lines on gobe or underglaze color can easily be wiped off when dry. So you can see I'm trying to fill those crevices so that the color is flush, so that it's flush with the surface. You can even see how the on-gobe is beading up on wax resist. That's what wax resist does. It resists materials. Now where I carved, we don't have wax resist. Where I carved is just raw clay. And so the hope is that this color sits in that raw clay, stays in that raw clay, even after I scrape off all the extra outside the lines underglaze. So I'm really gooping it in, and I'm okay with that. This right here is gonna take a good day of drying. After this step, I can put this away for the day, actually maybe leave it out to wick, watch its water content. And the next step will be carving off the excess. What you'll need for Sgraffito: underglaze or any non-glaze colorant. You could use oxides, on-gobes, you could use underglaze or even slips. You'll need a pattern or an idea. You're going to want to try various carving tools from the thick to the thin. Experiment, see what you like. My favorite is a dull wooden pencil. You're going to need time and patience because after you paint and apply your underglaze, you'll need it to dry before you begin carving out. Sgraffito is applying the color first with a non-glazed colorant and then going in and carving. And again, you have various tools to choose from with Sgraffito. Try them all. We've got a very kind of advanced or complex design here where the clay body was brown and green underglaze was put on and then scratched away. This is finished where it's been glazed, but what I just described was done at the green stage. You don't have to be this complex, but if you do, you should have a visual reference. Sgraffito can be nothing more than just carving out of painted greenware. So this greenware is soft leather hard. The reason that you need to paint the underglaze on leather hard, preferably, or soft leather hard clay is because underglaze introduces moisture, and we're trying to keep the carvings that we do from being gooey and goopy. So if we're adding moisture to clay, we're making it more soft, and it makes it a little goopy and difficult for when we do the carving. Now, each underglaze has a different viscosity, has a different temperament, does different things. Oftentimes, you have to wait for the underglaze to dry before you add your second and third coat. So you read the label. Some of them will say 2 coats, some of them will say 3 coats. But I'm not waiting for mine to dry, and it's coating very nicely. I've done about, I think, probably 3 or more coats. So that's the first step to Sgraffito. Make sure any unused, uncontaminated material gets put back in the jar so that we can sustain the life of these materials. The final steps of Sgraffito: the clay is nice and leather hard, soft leather hard. The underglaze has dried completely. So I'm going to show you a very geometric way to do carving. So I'm reinforcing the outline that I started as my boundary up top. It disappeared a little bit when I painted the underglaze, and I'm not concerned about the underglaze that's outside the lines, but I'm going to need to observe that boundary and this one down here. And I'm going to simply, and this is just a sketch outline, this is not a commitment, drawing a straight line. Geometrically, I jump across to the other side, and this would be the opposite side. So I'm going to do the same thing here. The mark that goes between these 2 lines, and I'm eyeballing this, it's not precise, and then across. So I'm showing you how to achieve geometry if you want it. I've got these 4 sections with lines, and I go to the middle. Lines, and I go to the middle. I completed by just continuing to go to the center between any 2 lines. And if I wanted to, I could make lines even closer, but I'm not going to. I'm going to commit now with a beveled loop tool, and I'm going to start at top and take it down to the bottom. I've got my guidelines here, my sketches that I did with the bamboo skewer, and now I use this ribbon tool, beveled. The metal is flat, that's what makes it beveled. It's not rounded. And notice, because this is soft leather hard, it just cooperates really nicely with me. So this is Sgraffito. I have painted the underglaze, and now when the piece is dry, the underglaze is dry, and the piece is leather hard or soft leather hard, I am carving out. I could continue more carvings if I wanted to. I did take this as far as I really want to with Sgraffito. Maybe do opposite lines here.